Mary Margaret Cleary was born on the 23rd of January 1917 in Cork. She left home around 1933, aged just 16, initially leaving on a bicycle and eventually living in a traditional horse-drawn caravan. She eventually adopted the name of Barry, her only daughter's married name. For almost 20 years, from 1933 to 1953, Maggie Barry travelled the length and breadth of Ireland, playing at fairs, markets and football matches, performing popular folk ballads and earning a good living. She quickly gained a reputation as a very popular entertainer.
It was on the road to Bandon one morning in July. Sure, I met a lovely colleen and she smiled as she passed by.
At a time when Irish traditional music might have been heading for extinction, exiled musicians kept the flame burning, resulting in a vibrant Irish traditional music scene in London. The uncompromising voice and banjo of Margaret Barry were at its formidable heart. Teaming up with the great Sligo fiddle player Michael Gorman, Barry became a star on the burgeoning Irish folk scene and went on to headline concerts at the Royal Albert Hall in London and New York's Carnegie Hall.
A promoter named Raymond, he did sign a song to go over to London to sing an Irish song.
She was a major driving force of the folk revival emerging from post-war II Britain. She was discovered in Dundalk in 1952 by Alan Lomax, the renowned American folklorist, collector and archivist. Maggie Barry earned a reputation as a strong and versatile singer, with a great panache for entertainment. She accompanied herself on a 5-string banjo, performing popular folk songs of the time. She learned songs from various sources, and one of her most famous and enduring favourites, My Laggin' Love, was learnt by lingering outside a record shop long enough to listen to the song until she had it memorised. This is her story. Paddy Barry, singer and accordion player, is a grandson of Margaret Barry, and he was born and reared in Lawrencetown, his grandmother's last abode and resting place. He proudly perpetuates her legacy by singing her songs and playing her tunes, solo and as a member of the Maggie's Boy folk group, locally and throughout Ireland. Along with other siblings, he promotes her memory through the local Maggie Barry Folk Club in Lawrencetown.
She was born in Peter Street, in Cork, Peter Street. We went down there a couple of years ago. We actually found out where she was born. It's like above a charity shop. It's not far from, there's a wee chapel just round the corner from it. So that's where she was born.
Alan Woods is a Leitrim-born singer and is the Irish Traditional Music Archives liaison and field recording officer. He regularly interviews musicians, singers and dancers across Ireland and amongst the diaspora. His major works include productions for ITMA's Drawing from the Well series and his recent research and presentations on Maggie Barry, first presented at the Willie Clancy Summer School in 2024.
Yeah, Margaret grew up there on 21 Peter Street. In that area of the kind of centre of Cork, it was known as the Marsh. And a lot of tenement buildings in that area. And as I mentioned, Margaret's family was musical. Her own mother and father were musical. She had an uncle called Matty Thompson, who also played the fiddle. So she would have grown up in a very musical environment.
Thompson, a founder member of the Cork Pipers Club, won first prize at the inaugural Feis Ceoil in Dublin in 1897, but after repeating the feat the following year in Belfast, he was told his success precluded him from competing for a third year. Thompson died in 1903 and is buried at Cork's Kirk-upon graveyard. Thompson, who earned money by making funeral plumes for horse-drawn hearses, fell in hard times and pawned his uilleann pipes. A decade later, he returned to playing after Alderman William Farr, the first president of the Cork Pipers Club, lent him a set of pipes once owned by the scholar and music collector Canon James Goodman.
He made pipes, flutes, and all these class of instruments, you know. I tell you how I know, is that my mother had a lot of precious little things belonged to those people, belonged to my grandmother, she had a grandfather, my grandfather and grandmother, that's her mother and father, and she had a lot of little precious things belonged to them. She had a little stool that my grandfather used to hold up his leg in, playing the pipes, little stool, you see, and she had several other little leather bags, and she had 300 reeds, that means reeds for the regulator, reeds for the pipes. She also had other instruments belonged to them as well, and she had all the photographs of all these people right around in her home. Every one of them in life size. Matty Thompson and Robert Thompson, Jackie Thompson, and Dennis Thompson, and grandfather, and all these people, me mother, me grandmother, all our selection, and in each one of them is all music. Every one of them playing as their own.
That was the voice of Maggie Barry talking to Alan Lomax.
Oh, we chatted very freely as we jogged along the road. With her and the champion of Leinster.
There is an interview where she speaks about her mother, I think, singing the song Her Mantle's So Green. So we can definitely see there that there is that kind of traditional repertoire that she would have been exposed to.
When he, the governor, presented a prize to the best in the land, and young Richards.
Margaret talks fondly to Alan Lomax about her memories of her mother, who passed away when Margaret was in her early teens.
But she was the finest woman that ever lived in the city of Cork. And another thing about her, she was a producer, organising, plays, collections, house-to-house collections, you know. She'd go now, we'll say, from one neighbour to another. She'd gather up, you see, well, sit you want to get threepence and fourpence and sixpence, whatever you could afford. And then all in the coming up to the Christmas time, all this money would be in a box, collected up for the purpose. And then they'd all start, you see, to get rehearsals and singing and going over these things. But I don't even barely remember this, you know, barely remember.
Margaret recalls, with some trepidation, telling her father about her first public performance in Macroom and returning home with a hat full of coins.
So when I come to the door, I had this money in the hat, and I collected and put it in my pocket, and of course I had the old hat the whole time, but I wasn't going to bring it to the house, but anyways, he wouldn't pass no remarks to that. But I was just half frightened to tell him that I saw him. And when I went in, he asked me to know where was I. And for a moment I didn't answer him. And he says, answer me. He says, where were you? So then I had to tell the truth, and I told him, I says, I was out in Macroom. He says, what brought you that far? I says, I went out there. I says, I was singing. And then with that, my father took an awful fit of laughing. See? He says, you were what? I says, I was singing. I says, singing in the town, you know. He says, I do. He says, but he says, I'd never believe. He says, you got the courage to go out. He says, it's singing there. Well, he says, I did. I had to do something. Oh, yes, he says, I had to do something. Well, I said, I had. I wanted the prices of pictures, but however, anyway, my father didn't leave me all the money. He gave me so much. I went to the pictures and ended up very happily.
She just decided to kind of leave the new family unit, and she headed off on her own. Anywhere between 14 to 16 could be the time frame where she headed off on her own. And I think she mentioned that Lismore was the first place that she went off to, and that she went there to start busking, to busk the cinema queues. And she spoke also in one of the interviews with Lomax about getting a busker who she met in Lismore, asking him to teach her a tune on the fiddle called Sonelli's Serenade, which was an Italian piece which was popular at the time.
And do you remember me telling you about that violin player? Well, he had a kind of a way, like he was going to learn me this song, you see. He didn't learn me the half of it. And some way or another I thought that I'd like the rest of it, you know. Terzilli Serenata, that's what they call it. He had a copy of it, of course I can't read music. So he met me in Lismore, and he was playing in the street, you know. He wasn't playing in a dance hall or a big person or anything like that. He just played in the street, playing for his living. And he was talking to me, of course I knew him before that, you know. I met him in Waterford, several places. Some way or another I couldn't like him. And you know, I should have married him. Because you see, he was a musician like myself. And I think that a lot of the two of us would get on very well. But that's it, you see. I wasn't in love with him, you see, but it was whatever is in his hand. So he asked me, I asked him then, I said, would you learn me Terzilli Serenade? I said, I can't read music. He says, I will. So he took the violin and he started playing for me. He said, get the right ear at that now. And I did. And he gave me the copy of it. And he says, read, can't you read? He says to me, I can. He says, I will go with that, he says, and I'll play it for you. So he did. Well, then I was in a boarding house. And constant. I said, could you get me a wine? I said, I'm very fond of a wine. He says, I will. He says, would you like him? He says, it won't be a very good one, mind. He says, I to Mary, well, says, I won't have practice on it. So he got me this old wine. I said, indeed, it wasn't good. And indeed, the bow of it was only about 2 or 3 hairs in it altogether. You know, it wasn't much good, like. The wine, it wasn't bad, like. Would you believe what I'm going to tell you? And while I was in that house by myself, that I lost a whole 3 months summer, 3 months of the summer, trying to finger that violin. I never knew what it was to get asleep. Day and night, every minute, every time
It's impossible. Nobody can stay awake that long.
Well, I'm telling you that of course I wouldn't say like that I could stop awake that long. I take a little doze in between, you know. But the very minute I waken, I'd start off the wine again. How does it come that I had so much of a crave for that now?
I don't know.
All the time, taking in all the time.
It seems to be around the war years maybe that she kind of came into the area of the kind of the border region of Louth, Monaghan, Armagh, which became a real staple centre for the places where she lived and busked over a good number of years from the mid-40s to the early 50s. And then Margaret later kind of linked in and teamed up with a Barry family, and that's actually where the name comes from. And we do know that the Barry, when she was kind of travelling around with the Barry family, that they were travelling by kind of horse and cart, or with a wagon, with a horse and with a wagon, and that this would have been a means of transport when for the family unit kind of travelling around, moving between locations. They would have gone to a location, camped there maybe for 2 or 3 months. Like she mentions places like in that kind of northern region, places where they kind of lived for a period of time would have been Castleblaney, Carrickmacross. They were known to have been out in the Cooley Peninsula area, camped at a place called Bush, and then also maybe perhaps best well known out of a lot of the places was just outside Crossmaglen in the kind of Craigengban area. They were camped at the foot of Drumbally Hill there. But again, a lot of these places, stay for a few months, busk around the area, go to the fairs and markets, and then move on again to another place. Spent a lot of time in Dundalk as well. There are some reports that Margaret spent some time living in an area called Tuberona and on the kind of edge of Dundalk.
My memory of her, she was tall and she wore dark clothes.
Now you agree with me. I thought she was tall. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe we were very small.
Paddy Craven and Pat McKenna are two Dundalk residents who have vivid memories of Maggie Barry as she went about her business in Dundalk around the 1950s. Here they share some of their memories.
Well, she used to sing outside of Woolworths, which is in Clanbrassil Street, but Woolworths is long gone. She used to stand facing Woolworths, hoping that all those people coming out of Woolworths would give her a penny. I doubt if she'd ever get a threepenny bit.
No, well, a penny at the time was of some considerable value, believe it or not. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the most she would get. I think it would be probably in the 50s. I can so well remember riding my bicycle down the road here, and at the bottom of the hill, a place we call the Granny's Bridge. And I have still a vision of that lady riding a bicycle down the hill and continuing on ahead of me. And as she passed by the bridge, I realised she had a couple of rabbits, dead rabbits, tied to the handlebars, which obviously she had captured up the road where she lived, where she had a camp there. I remember my father used to always go to Dundalk on a Saturday morning. At that time, people worked a half day on Saturday, and he would be going in with his books to the county council office. And I remember him saying when he came home how he had come out of the office and he had made his way towards the square, and as he reached the square he heard the voice of Margaret Barry, and he got off his bicycle and he stopped to listen to her. And he came home and told us it was just brilliant.
Farewell, my own dear native land, for here I cannot stay.
Now, my other memory myself of hearing her sing would be in the athletic grounds. It was a lovely big football field where all the county games would be played and big club matches. And we, at that time, we were three young fellas and we would walk into the footballs. She would sing at probably maybe before the match, but certainly not during the match, or she'd be hunted. No, maybe at half time in the game.
I can't remember her singing inside the athletic grounds, but maybe she did.
Oh, I can, and I can even remember where I was, Pat, over the other side of the grounds on the planks.
Oh, yes.
The planks that were up along, and I can remember standing up on them planks and Maggie down in front of me singing.
In 1958, Jim Craven from Balrigan, Kilcurry, wrote this poem about Margaret Barry, who was camped on the road near to their house in a place called Ballinfull, which is mentioned actually in the poem. And now Jim's brother, Paddy Craven, is going to sing the song, if we can get him started. Off you go there, Paddy.
Oh, my name is Maggie Barry, a minstrel girl I am, and I have sung my Irish songs for dear old Uncle Sam. My ballads span the oceans, my songs ring overseas, but I remain the tink liquor made from the banks of Cork sweet Lee. I'll give you Elvis Presley, you can have your Tommy Steele. For though them boys can rock and roll, they can't play jigs or reels. But I can strum me banjo, and I can sing me song. Sure, I care no more about 'em than the ground they rock upon.
Jerry O'Connor comes from Dundalk, County Louth, and was taught by his mother Rose, who was a descendant of 3 generations of fiddle players. With a focus on his local music of Oriel, he is known worldwide as a solo artist and as a founder band member of La Lou, Skylark and Oriala. He has recorded 14 albums, with his first solo album, Journeyman, hailed as a landmark album of Irish fiddle music, and he has performed with all of the leading performers of Irish traditional music, including members of the Chieftains, Boys of the Loch, Planxty, Dedanan and Bothy Band.
My father's brother, Michael O'Connor, he was the manager of the Home and Colonial grocery shop in Earl Street in Dundalk, across the road from it. It was a National Bank grocery store. And whether he allowed it or he encouraged it, but anyway, my mother used to bring me up to listen to Margaret Barry busking outside the shop in Earl Street. And my uncle would be there, and Margaret used to play on the street. And that was my first memory of her. I believe she lived out in a railway carriage out in Tuberonia, out past Fatima Park. I remember years later I met her in Dundalk. Well, I went to a concert. I brought my mother, and we were in MJ's bar at the back of MJ's in Park Street, actually right across the road from the Dundalk FM studio. And that was a lounge bar room, and we heard Margaret Barry was playing there, and we walked in the door to the venue, and there was a woman taking the money in the box office dressed in an Irish dancing costume and makeup, which I thought was very strange. And so we paid in and we sat down, and a good number of people at the gig, and the woman in the box office locked the door, went up on stage, introduced Margaret Barry, and Margaret came out, and she had a case of pint bottles of Guinness on the stage. They were all open, and I was fascinated watching her tipping away the bottles of Guinness to the gig.
Margaret Barry settled into a life around the border counties of Louth, Armagh and Down, and it suited her well. But things were about to change, and the key person in that change was Alan Lomax. For decades, John Lomax, with his son Alan, travelled across America, preserving the country's disappearing folk songs and oral traditions. They recorded everything from prison work songs in the south to cowboy ballads in the west, creating an invaluable archive for the Library of Congress. But their work didn't end there. In the early 1950s, Alan took his mission abroad, carrying his portable tape recorder to Ireland, convinced that the heart of its ancient musical culture was also on the verge of extinction. In 1951, he quite literally stumbled upon a musical dynamo, Margaret Barry. Lomax's assistant, Robin Roberts, a folk singer and actress from Utah, came across Maggie busking on the main street in Dundalk. She rushed back to the Imperial Hotel to alert Lomax of her find. He recorded her, and he in turn alerted Peter Kennedy, BBC field researcher based in London. Kennedy returned to Ireland in 1953, and with the help of Sean O'Wheal, the County Armagh folklorist and teacher, found her living in a barrel-top wagon in Craigenban just outside Crossmaglen. Kennedy photographed and recorded her, and the tapes made their way to Seamus Ennis's As I Roved Out folk radio programme being broadcast by the BBC UK-wide. She subsequently appeared on Lomax's BBC TV programme Song Hunter in 1953, produced by a young David Attenborough. The cat was out of the bag. This copper-fastened her meteoric rise to fame. Lomax invited her to London, and the Barry roller coaster was well underway. Margaret was a traveller woman with a raw, emotionally charged singing style that Lomax immediately recognised as something special. He recorded her extensively, and through his broadcasts and recordings introduced her to a wider audience, transforming her from a local performer into a national and international star. Their collaboration and friendship helped to preserve and popularise a form of traditional Irish music that was often overlooked.
A promoter named Raymond, he did sign us on to go over to London to sing an Irish song. Still I love him, I'll forgive him, I'll go with him wherever he goes.
And when I began to make my own way then, got around, I met Michael, friendly person, and talked a lot, and we went to the pictures here and there. So he helped me out a great deal, and then he told me about the pub. He says, he says you could get a couple of nights at Pat Murray's. And I said, that'd be grand. I says, actually, I'm just half nervous to do any cues or anything like that here. I says, because I'm not so well up about the country, you see. And I said, I don't know whether I'm going to be lifted or something like that. So I was afraid to sort of do it, like. And well, in Ireland, I wasn't too bad, like. I could make myself way around there. But in another country, you don't know these things. You don't know the rules and the regulations. So you had to be sort of careful. So Michael brought me then to the Pat Murray's, and he got me 2 nights a week in it. And that was my first starting of 25 shillings a night. And I could have me collections anytime I want. And very nice man, it's Pat Murray, very decent man, one of the best landlords in London, as far as I'm concerned. And he's been very good, and then he changed it then from 2 nights to 3. Then he gave me 4 nights, see? So Pat held on to me the whole time till he left the Bedford Arms.
Together, Gorman and Barry were the musical hosts of at least 4 weekly sessions in the Bedford Arms in Camden Town from the mid-1950s, earning a steady and sufficient income. Initially, landlords were reluctant to pay musicians, but Barry forced the pace by doing the rounds of the pub with a collection bag after their performances, eventually embarrassing publicans into paying musicians. For the next few years, they dominated the Irish traditional music scene in London, with many young recently arrived musicians looking to listen to and play alongside the legendary Gorman. The Sligo fiddle reputation and repertoire was the initial main attraction, but Barry's skillful and to the west of Ireland exiles, new and exotic 5-string banjo accompaniment, and her increasingly popular ballads became an attraction that equalled and even complemented Gorman's status and attraction. A young Dubliner named Luke Kelly, recently arrived off the boat from his native city, was taking note. While the folk revival of the 50s was getting underway in both Britain and Ireland, Barry was emerging into something of a cult icon, encouraged by her self-proclaimed gypsy image.
In part 1 of the remarkable story of Margaret Barry, we heard the voices of Paddy Barry, Margaret's grandson, Alan Woods, liaison and field recording officer with the Irish Traditional Music Archive, and we heard recordings of conversations between Margaret Barry and Alan Lomax, with permission of Anna Wood, daughter of Alan Lomax, courtesy of culturalequity.org archives. Paddy Craven and Pat McKenna, Dundalk dramatists. Paddy Craven sang a poem about Margaret Barry, which was written by his late brother Jim Craven. Jerry O'Connor, professional fiddle player, recalled seeing Margaret Barry with his mother Rose in MJ's Park Street, Dundalk. The Oriel Traditional Music Archives, Newry, provided advice and support. The remarkable story of Margaret Barry was researched, recorded and produced by Tommy Fagan and edited by Alan Byrne.